got Neil Hathaway, been in town for a few years. So Neil, give us the beginning, how your family got here into Orange.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Neil. I'm a lifelong resident of Orange. And my parents have spent most of their lives here also. So I figured we'd share a little bit of history with you. We have quite a bit of memories and history that went on in Orange. Mom moved into Orange in 1940 with her mother and her stepfather. Her mother was an invalid with one leg, so she took care of him. And I still live in the home that she came to at this point. That was my childhood home. She went on living there until my dad came home from the war. Dad had quite a rough start in life. He was born in Killingworth. He was put out of the home at 16 because they couldn't afford to keep him, and they said he'd have to go out on his own and earn a living. So at 16, he went to work at Choate School. He worked the grounds, he did landscaping, and ran the equipment and maintenance, that type of thing. He moved on to the city of Waterbury. There was a lot of construction going on at that time, and he was driving heavy equipment for Waterbury when the war came along. When the war came along, he went and signed up. He went overseas just before D-Day. He was assigned to Patton's 3rd Armored Division. And he had quite a war career with Patton's 3rd Armored Division. They went through the liberation sweep through Europe and liberated a lot of the cities and towns throughout Europe. At the end of the war, he didn't have much to do here. He didn't know many people, and he stayed on in the service over in Europe. And he drove a tank retriever, which was basically a tow truck for tanks. They were clearing up the battlefields and trying to keep the technology within, our reach. He came back around 46 or 47, and he only had one friend in the area, and they introduced him to my mom. And as my mom would tell the story, she said he showed up on my doorstep with an ashtray and a suitcase and spent the rest of his life in that home. They got married, and Dad went to work around town, working for Elmer Manley Sr. was a name in town that everybody who's been here a while would know. They did a lot of construction. He worked on the old police station on the Post Road. They built that. He built homes on Riverdale Road, eventually going to work for George Cook, Roy Lassen, building homes at Estelle Court, Shepherd Lane area, then over to North Lakeview, and continued on in that trade until probably around the 60s. In the 60s, Dad had a heart attack. It was a mild heart attack. It set him back a little bit, but not much. He was a pretty tough guy. He went into the painting business, and he was a painting contractor. He painted a lot of homes in Orange. He also painted the Congregational Church, or portions of it. He painted the Town Hall, or portions of it. He painted at the Holy Infant Church, portions of it. Many homes, and the list just goes on and on. Dad was a volunteer fireman. He loved the fire department. He was a member of the American Legion. He would look forward to the carnival every year and the Memorial Day parade. Those were two of his things that he really enjoyed. He enjoyed taking us, and we enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. So I came along, I guess, in around 55. Well, it was 55, not around 55. And grew up, went through the school system in Orange, through Mariel Tracy School. At that time was K through 6, and we went through all the grades into the Amity system. I joined the fire department, following my dad in his footsteps, and it was there that I met a gentleman by the name of Donald Burns. Donald Burns worked for Flanagan Ambulance at the time, and he thought I would do well working for the ambulance company and invited me to come down and take a look. So I went and got a first aid card. It's all that you needed to work on an ambulance at that time. That was in the early 70s. and I went to work for Flanagan Ambulance. Shortly thereafter, we decided that ambulance crews should probably become EMTs and have a little bit more medical background. So I went through EMT school. I went through the second EMT school ever put on at Yale New Haven Hospital. After graduating from EMT school, I continued on with Flanagan and the fire department and set my sights toward this police department. I thought that that would be an interesting career. I was too young, but they did offer a job as a dispatcher. I ended up dispatching for the Orange Police Department for a couple of years until I turned 21. And at 21, I got hired as a regular police officer in the town of Orange. I had a great career at the police department. I worked for almost 26 years at the police department. I became a fingerprint expert. I did crime scene work. I worked patrol for 9 years. I retired as a sergeant and supervisor of a shift. And there was a lot going on back then. I can tell you history of the post road. Sunday was a very boring day on the post road. The blue laws were still in effect. There was nothing open on the post road. The stores were all closed. It was like a ghost town. On Sunday, there was all trucking companies and diners, and it was the only thing open. Time DC was a big trucking company there. Adley was a big trucking company there. There was Ed's Diner. There was the Park Diner, the Whaler Diner. You wouldn't have recognized the post road back then. I went on to get married later and married my wife, Wendy. She came from New Haven. She was in early child care, early childhood education. And she was working for a lady in Orange, Mrs. Deadman, Stefania Deadman, Taffy they call her. She had a home daycare, and Wendy worked with her at the daycare, and she decided that if Wendy would go with her, they would open up a daycare center in Orange. And I believe that's the first daycare center to open in Orange. That was around 1980. Wendy went with Taffy, and they opened the daycare center in 1980. And to this day, Wendy is still at that daycare center. We now own that center. We purchased it in 1999. She's graduated children from that center that are now in Annapolis, the Naval Academy. She graduated a gentleman that is now playing professional football for the Miami Dolphins. She has doctors, dentists, lawyers. They've all graduated and come through that system. It's amazing when she walks around town how many people walk up to her and say, "You had me in daycare." So that's a little slice of history of Orange, and I'd like to tell you how I enjoyed Orange growing up. You know, it was a different time. We enjoyed pickup baseball in the backyard. We enjoyed going out into the woods and spending our days in the woods. My mother would pack us a lunch, and we would just wander off into the woods, and we'd have lunch there and find a shady tree and a bunch of moss and just sit down and eat our lunch and walk around and throw stones in the ponds. And we knew all of the paths and the woods and the trees, and we had a path that went all the way from Orange Center Road all the way through to Tyler City Road. And when it was time to come home, my mom would blow a whistle, and we'd hear the whistle from deep in the woods. There wasn't a lot of noise pollution back then. And we could hear that whistle, and we knew that that was time to come home. So we would scramble and get home for supper, and that was pretty much it. I retired from police work in 2002. I went to a company in Watertown, Connecticut called Gowan's Night Corporation, where they build emergency equipment, fire trucks, from the ground up pretty much. And I'm presently still employed there, trying to figure out how to slow down and stop working, I guess. But I don't know if that'll ever happen because it's in my blood. Some of the things that, other things that I enjoyed in town growing up were the Fireman's Carnival was always a wonderful outlet for me. It was a great time. And we looked forward to that every year. Dad would be working up there and Mom would take us up and we'd have a great time. Memorial Day Parade was the start of the summer. We always looked forward to that and we were always so proud of my dad. He was marching with either the fire department or the American Legion. He was a proud guy and we thought a lot of it. So that was a great thing. Orange Little League is another thing that I went through, and that's a great program, by the way, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do have here in Orange, but the Little League program was always very good in Orange, and I have a godson right now who went through the entire Little League system and has now been drafted by the Minnesota Twins.
Wow.
And he's playing in one of their low A or high A teams right now. He was also drafted by the Yankees out of high school. He opted to go to UConn instead and played ball there for 3 years until Minnesota came along and made him an offer he couldn't refuse. So he's now with the Minnesota Twins. So what Orange provides for opportunity and for children and for people, and you know, I frequently hear, not frequently, but I do hear people complain, oh, we don't have garbage pickup, we don't have sewers, we don't, what do we have, what do we have? We have a lot in Orange, you just have to look, it's there. We have a tremendous Little League program. We have a wonderful soccer program. Personally, I've been playing baseball in the town of Orange since I was 19 years old. And I just stopped playing pretty much last year. So those programs are available. We have after-school programs for the children. We have the carnival. We have the agricultural fair. There's a whole host of programs and things that we have here for Orange if you take advantage of it. We have a beautiful community center. We have a beautiful walking track. And if you're looking after that, when you become a senior, we have a beautiful senior support staff and system that goes on up at that community center with rides and visiting nurses. There's a lot that Orange can provide, and they do provide. And I think we've done a wonderful job in the town of Orange to provide that. I've enjoyed it my whole life, and it's my home. I have no plans to go anywhere else. Anybody have questions?
Good. You know who built that walking track?
Who built that walking track? Dad?
Mm-hmm. And he said, I don't know why they're building a walking track. Nobody's going to use it. I think that's one time we really proved him wrong.
Yeah, we did. It's become a very popular site. And another, that brings to light another thing I want to say. The volunteerism in Orange is very underrated. We have volunteers working everywhere. And, you know, I worked for the police department, as I told you, for many years. And I met many, many people. I was in and out of a lot of homes. I was in and out of businesses. And there's a whole bunch of nice people in this town, a whole bunch of beautiful volunteers that support that fair every year. Those are all volunteers putting that on. That Orange Fire Department Carnival, just take a look at that food booth. Those are all volunteers. Look at those soccer programs and all those coaches and moms that are up there helping with the children. Those are all volunteers. Look at all the boards we have in Orange, from the selectmen board all the way down to the education boards and the wetland boards and the zoning boards. These are all volunteers. These people are not paid for that. They're giving their time and their expertise, and they're providing a service to the town of Orange, which to me is unsurpassed. I think if you slow down and look at right near you, your neighborhood, your neighbors, you're going to be surprised to find a whole bunch of really nice people out there. We need to slow down a little bit and smell the roses. It's a fast pace around here. We kind of get caught up and do more, go faster, make more. But if we slow down a little bit and stop to smell the roses, there's a lot of nice people here in this town.
Beautiful. Boy, you could not have been a better advertisement for the town of Orange. Honest to goodness.
I didn't get paid. No one has been paid, and no one has been hurt in the making of this video.
Oh my gosh, Neil, that was beautiful. Do you guys have questions about any?
Do you have any like memories from your career, you know, as a police officer or?
Wow.
Any like real interesting?
Yes, there's a lot. I mean, I took part in the investigation of several murder cases, and one particular murder case I won't do details on, but it took us to New York City, where we kicked in an apartment door on 30th Street, and with a fugitive warrant squad from Manhattan.
Wow.
And we apprehended the 2 murder suspects in Manhattan on 30th Street. And people are often shocked to see that. And, you know, they say, well, you were from Orange, what were you doing in Manhattan? The crime took place in Orange, and we'll follow you to the end of the earth if we need to get you. And they had, we had been teamed up with the Fugitive Warrant Squad, the Federal Marshal Service. That's all they did was chase criminals, and we had information, we had developed intel that these people were going to be at a certain place and time at an apartment there, and we did a surveillance on it. And I particularly was walking down the sidewalk with the assigned marshal and walked right by them and watched them walk into the apartment or into the building and into the elevator. And I said, they just went up. Interestingly, we opened the trunk of the car and out came the shotguns and the bulletproof vests, and everybody suited up. The sidewalks were busy, and people never looked twice. We went into the apartment, and we made the apprehension and the arrest without any issues. Transferred them to the federal hold because they had to go through, you know, they had to be transferred to Orange. Extradition process, so we brought them to the Manhattan federal hold and came home. They were eventually convicted and got 85 years. Wow. That was one of them. There were many other interesting cases and investigations that I took part in. I had some very interesting fingerprint cases that I put together. I mentioned I was a fingerprint expert. And we solved a lot of crimes on fingerprints back then. And now it's all automated. But it's not completely automated. That still has to be verified by a certified examiner. The computer can't testify in court. The examiner has to take that hit out of the computer and has to do a visual examination and testify to that in court. You can't cross-examine the computer.
No, no.
So, and fingerprint is still an absolute science. It's better than DNA.
Really?
Identical twins have the same DNA. They do not have the same fingerprints.
Interesting.
So we haven't found the same fingerprints. So fingerprinting was a very interesting field for me, and the photography also, it brought me all to all the scenes and the you know, where the action was, so to speak, throughout my life. Many phone calls in the middle of the night, and it was interesting. So I was a youth officer. I worked with the kids a lot for a while. You know, going into the schools and doing early intervention with the kids in the kindergarten. So, you know, I went through that portion of support with the children in the education process. I'm trying to think of.
Was that the DARE program? Was that?
That was
pre-DARE.
This was pre-DARE.
Oh,
yes.
I didn't know we had. Okay.
So we used to go in and do a Halloween program, safety program.
Oh, nice.
Every year. We would go into Mariel. And do that. We did the drug program at the junior high. We would go in and educate people on drugs. We had the now famous drug board, they used to call it, that had an example of the pills and all the pipes and everything on it. It was always exciting for the kids to look at and got a kick out of it. And We did a lot of intervention with the school systems and some speaking also with that. I used to go and do speeches for the Rotary. I did some of the PR stuff for the police department back in the day. And, a lot of it has changed. I mean, the police department and police work has changed, as everybody knows today. But we were a proud bunch back then, and it was really a camaraderie, much more so, I think, than it is today. Not that it's not, but back then, you know, you had to stay. You had to stay 25 years to get a pension back then, and you had to be there 10 years to get vested rights. And if you left anywhere in between, you got nothing. So when you went there, you didn't go just to work a couple of years or to transfer to another department. You went there for a career, and we were all in it together. So it was a real camaraderie, and it was interesting. We supported each other. We were, you know, we socialized together. The wives and the girlfriends socialized together, and it was a very close-knit organization. And police work has changed, and not only where I am, or not only here in Orange, it's all over. The whole thing has changed, and I'm not sure it's for the better. I think we need to get back to some of that. But you know, crime has changed also. So me being out of it now for so long, it's not fair for me to criticize or to say what's right or what's wrong. But I think some of that camaraderie is needed. We got to get that back.
When you were on the post road back in your beginning of your career,
yes,
what was kind of like the biggest issue? Now, shoplifting right now is ridiculous.
No, there was a lot of burglary back then. When you patrolled the post road, your main goal was, and they said if you can't stop the burglary, you got to find the burglary. Burglary was one of the big crimes back then. Sometimes on those quiet summer nights, we would park in certain spots with the windows open because you could hear glass break, and we would be, you know, just quiet, just sitting there, and you could actually hear a glass break. And if you heard the glass break or the wood crunching, you would take off and find that, you know. So we did make some apprehensions on the burglaries. And the other thing was you got to know the traffic. You knew who was going to work at Adley for the midnight shift, and you knew who was getting out at 3 o'clock, and you knew who was going by at 2 o'clock. And when you saw the car that didn't, you might want to just keep an eye on it and see where it went, because that one didn't fit the curriculum. You know, it was a different way of policing. You know, back then you could do it. Today the traffic is, you can't do it. There's traffic everywhere. But back then, you know, you knew which cars were supposed to be going back and forth there. It was an interesting concept. And sitting and listening for glass break, I mean, I don't think you can do that today. We actually even came to a point where we had those headsets with the ears, and we would put them out.
They amplify.
Because you could really hear a lot then. And you'd be surprised what you could hear with those.
That's interesting.
We utilized that. Yeah. And another thing we used to look forward to was what I call the world's first food truck. It used to come down. It was, well, we nicknamed it the Roach Coach, to be honest with you, but it used to come down at 3 o'clock in the morning, but you know, that hot coffee was good back then. There was nowhere else to get it, and the soup was delicious, and the guy that ran it was a wonderful guy, and we used to look forward to stopping that and getting a hot cup of coffee on a cold winter night. It was the only place to, you know, it was the only game in town. So we would do that. That was another one of the things I remember. But watching the post road grow up was interesting. I mean, I told you earlier on in the interview that the blue laws, there was nothing going on a Sunday, but watching it transform from diners and truck stops into commercial sales and real estate, and you know, the industry that we've got. And another thing that I think Orange has done a great job with is gone through the growing pains, but done a very good job at it. You can't agree with everything, but overall, they've done a really good job. You know, we've kept our industry and our tax base up down at the Post Road end and south. It keeps the residential area up here, and the tax base comes in, and we've done a pretty fair job of managing the zoning and the changes in Orange, I think. The Post Road growing up is where I was going. I remember Whiteacre Shopping Center was what we knew it as. It's where Burlington Coat Factory is at the corner of Post Road and Bull Hill Lane. Called it Whiteacre Shopping Center. When they built the Sears in there, that was huge when they built that in. And that was the first, I think, big store that went in, and then Woolco came in down the other end of the Post Road, and then slowly but surely, you know, the diners went down, and the truck terminals went down, and Hitchcock Plaza came in, and all of the stores and commercial properties came in. Home Depot came in, Builder Square came in, Pergament came in, Shaw's Food Mart came in. All of these stores, many of them are come and gone by now. Of course, Home Depot is still there, but Builder Square is gone, Bradley's is gone. All of those places have come and gone, and I watched it. I watched it happen. And another point, I told you that I work up a little bit north up Route 8, and there's another town up there that I work in, and I read the paper every morning, a couple of headlines just before work, and I noticed that the smaller towns up there are going through the same changes that we've been through, and they struggle with the same issues, and nothing has changed except the geography. I mean, they go through the problems of the zoning, and they go through the problems of the, you know, where do we put an edge to the zoning, and how do we stop, and how do we accommodate affordable housing, and how do we do this, and the wetlands issues are always issues, and the zoning issues are always issues. And I just look at it, and the first responder for medical is still done by the fire departments up there, and they're getting overwhelmed with the volunteers, and they don't know how to handle it. And it's the same thing that's going on in our town that we have been just a few years ahead of. It's so interesting to watch that exact same scenario play out, and you only wish that you could walk in and say, hey, I got an idea, you know, this is how we did it, you know, and you don't have to like it or not like it, but I just figure I'd throw it out there, you know. And like I said, you can't all agree on everything and all of the projects that have gone on, but if you look at it overall, we've done a pretty fair job. We really have. So.
Anything else?
So, do you have any memories with kind of, you know, familiar names from the town? Like, you know, we've interviewed a lot of people, and I would imagine that some of these people that we've interviewed, you may have come across or have some relations with. So
Absolutely. Judy was telling me who was interviewed, and I just said, well, I think I know all of them, but I said, I'm honored to be amongst that group of people. Those people are just dedicated people to this town of Orange, and without exception, the Walt Disputas and the Gloria Capisulatros, and it just, you know, I don't want to leave anyone out, so I don't want to do too many more names, but those people are the town of Orange. You're gonna watch these interviews, and believe you, you know, I have some history, but these people are the town of Orange.
And I'm curious, like, did you have any memories with any particular person? Like, I know there's a lot of people.
Yeah,
I'm trying
like
to,
Emma, you've got Gloria as your neighbor, Gloria Cash.
Yes.
You keep an eye on her still,
I do.
which I
I
think is
do.
awesome.
Yeah.
And working in the fire department with the Knights.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, all of them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Frank Knight Sr. was the fire chief, and he took me under his wing when I joined the fire department, and you know, the Capisolatros were always good friends, and good friends of my father's and good friends of mine, and the Casacrios are a wonderful group of people. You talk about, you know, volunteerism. You can walk around the walking track, and that gazebo you're walking around was built by the Casacrios. Those people were always very good to me. You know, all of these people I've had contacts with, and I know them all. And Judy's dad, I mentioned to her, he used to pull in my driveway, and we used to solve a lot of the town's problems right there in the driveway. But it was kind of a venting place for the two of us, and we left with a renewed vision. So it was pretty cool. So that's how far back I go.
and do you remember that, well, so I was just, we were talking about that water main break.
Oh, right up here? When the car,
Were you around for that?
you mean when the car went into the hole?
Yeah.
Oh, sure, I remember that. When I pulled up to that scene, all you could see was blue light emanating out of a hole. And it was one of our police officers called in and said, I'm stuck on Grassy Hill Road. And it's not snowing, how'd you get stuck? You know, and are you off the road? No, I'm on the road. Well, my back tire sunk in. Okay. Well, my other tire just sunk in. And okay, I gotta go, the whole car's going. And he threw the mic in the window and ran, and the water main had broken underneath the ground, and it had undermined all of the soil. And the hole was immense, and it swallowed the whole car, and it was the first car that had strobe lights as opposed to the old rotators. And as we pulled up, you could see the light just emanating out of the hole. It was really something.
It was, because even sitting here, we could look out across, and we could see this just blue glow.
Yeah, you saw the blue glow emanating, and that was Bob Stanky, God bless him.
Yeah.
He was quite a policeman, but yeah, that was Bob Stanky, and that whole road section had just completely collapsed. And
no one was hurt, right?
No one got hurt in that. He got away because it happened slowly. You know, one wheel, then the other wheel, and then he called in. So we called for a tow truck, and we just expected that the tow truck would come and pull it out. Well, by the time the tow truck got there, we needed a crane. Okay, so it was pretty funny.
And I think they have a picture of that. At the police department still.
Oh yeah.
Right by the chief's
office. I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do.
Picture.
That was classic.
And you remind me now that only 4 or 5 months ago, I came home or I was leaving my home. I pulled out of my driveway and I saw a little water on the road. So I said, well, it did snow, so maybe the salt was melting the ice. And when I came home, I saw some more water on the road, and I said, you know, the rest of the road is pretty dry. So I looked on my front lawn, and I saw a little bit of water bubbling out of my water main. So I said, maybe I better look at this a little more carefully. So I went over, and sure enough, it was really spongy, and the water was just leaking right out of the water main shut off. So I went in and I called the water company, and I said, you know, you've probably heard this before, but I've got some water leaking over here, and okay, well, do you think we need to come out now? And I was thinking of the car in the hole, and I said, well, unless this is undermining, you know, I still have water, I'm okay, but I'm nervous that it's undermining the road. It's very close to the road. Mm-hmm. And it is the water main, and I've seen this happen before. So They did send somebody out, and they checked it, and they repaired it. But when they repaired it, they said to me, well, the last we have on our computer is this shutoff was put in 38, so we're not surprised it went bad. I said, 38? Yeah, I said, well, they don't make things like they used to. So they went on and repaired that, and they're still not finished, by the way. In the spring, they have to fix my front lawn. But they were very good and repaired that. So that reminded me when you said the...
Well, and a good thing you had experience in that.
I
You
did
didn't
have some
park your
experience.
car over there.
No,
So
I
that was
didn't.
good.
I didn't go anywhere near that. So
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
it was interesting.
It is. It's interesting. You know, I was telling people about, you know, even years ago when we were kids and with the horses.
Yeah.
And the horses would take off and the police officers would
Oh,
just,
God.
they would just come along, they'd help us, they'd get the horses corralled someplace or whatnot. And it was nothing like, I didn't have to call up anybody and say, got a horse loose over here, can you come help us?
No, and we knew who to call also.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, we
And-
knew. We knew whose horse it was.
But that was what the town was like.
Yeah, sure,
You know,
sure.
everybody pitched in and just
Oh God,
did the
yes.
job.
I mean, I can tell you, we chased the cows.
Yes.
We chased the horses. We chased it all.
That's
We
it.
didn't just chase criminals. We chased everything. Yeah, dogs, horses, cows. We chased them all.
Yeah, definitely.
And like I said, we knew where they went, so it wasn't like we had to check the collar. We knew who to call, and to a point where we almost recognized the cows and the horses. You know, cows are out again. So
It was a very, very comforting feeling.
it was,
Knowing
it
that.
was, it was, and it was a different time. You know, it was a different time. I recognize that, but it was a good place to grow up. It really was.
Yeah, definitely. Good. Good. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Neil, that was just so
Yeah,
fantastic.
thanks.
You think?
You were so organized.
I was.
50 years from now, your kids are going to look at this and love it.
Okay.
They're going to love it. Honest to gosh. Really, really. And I love the story about your dad. I still, like, every time I think about that, your dad showing up with a suitcase and an ashtray.
Yeah. True story. True story.